In this video, we will be learning how to find the part of the whole. When we find the part of a whole, we can use several strategies. We can use models. We can express the percent as a fraction or decimal to show an equivalent part of the same whole. Or we can use a formula which we will call P over 100 times of equals is. Now, when you look at that formula and you hear me say it, it sounds really weird. So let's break it down and figure out what each part means. The P over 100 is the percent written as a fraction. Of will represent the whole, and then is will be our answer. And really is the part of the whole, which is what we're trying to find, the part of the whole. So let's try out a problem. Refer to the circle graph. Suppose there are 300 students at York Middle School. Determine the number of students that have cheese as a snack. I'm going to use my nosy and highlight my question first, and then I'm going to underline or circle any important numbers or information. I think the total number of students, 300 students, is important. Now I can look at my circle graph and I find that 15% of the students have cheese for a snack. The method we're going to use first to solve this problem is a bar diagram. And when we write our bar diagram, the benchmark percent that we're going to use to model our numbers is 10%. So we have a rectangle here, a bar diagram, and this bar diagram represents the entire number of students at the middle school, all 300. And that's 100% of the students. So you can see it on the bottom here, we're counting the number of students, and on the top we've listed the percents. So 300 students is equivalent to 100% of the students. Now, if you look at our bar diagram, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 little squares. And the reason that we have 10 squares is because 100 divided by 10, which is our benchmark percent, is 10. So each of these little squares represents 10% because there are 10 squares. Each of them represents 10%. If we added them all up, it would be 100%. And then if you look on the bottom, we're counting by 30s because 300 divided by 10 equals 30. So each of those little squares represents 30 students. So let's take a look. We see a dotted line right about here on our bar diagram. And that represents 15%. It's right in between 10 and 20%, and that's because 15% of the students had cheese for a snack. So we can color in one full box right here. We know at least 30 kids, 30 students were having cheese as their snack. But we're not going to stop there because that dotted line is halfway in between the 10 and 20% because it's 15%. And I know that because it's halfway in between this box, and this box represents 30 students, half of 30 is 15. So if we have 30 students here and then 15 more students here, that means that 45 students are having cheese as a snack. Now, if you like to see it worked out in numbers, then we can use our formula, P over 100 times of equals is. Well, the percent is 15, and remember, P over 100 is simply us writing our percent as a fraction. So it's going to be 15 over 100 times, and then remember, of represents the whole number. So this is 15% of 300 is what? So we can put an X there because we don't know what that is. Well, I notice that this looks a lot like a multiplying fractions problem that we've done in the past. So if I want to go ahead and make this 300 into a fraction, I can write it 300 over 1, and then it's easy for me to multiply these two fractions. First, I'll cross simplify, and then I can multiply straight across. And we can see again we get 45. So 45 students had cheese as a snack. Let's try a few other problems. Determine 12% of 70. Well, we are going to use our formula, P over 100 times of equals is, and we need to plug in the numbers that were given, but how do we figure out what goes where? Well, 12 is the percent, so 12 is going to be the P that we put over the 100. We're going to put the 12 over 100 to write it as our fraction. So we can do 12 over 100 times, and then we need to figure out what the of is going to be. What number represents of? Well, if you look at our problem here, the word of is right next to the number 70. So 70 is the whole. So 70 is going to fill in where that of was. And then we need to find out what the part is. So I can put an X here. So why don't you go ahead and pause the video to solve, because we know how to multiply fractions, and then press play to check your answer. So when I multiplied, I got 84 tenths. And I said to myself, remember that this little line right here represents a division problem. So this is the same thing as 84 divided by 10. And when I did that, I got 8.4, or 8 4/10. So our answer is 8 4/10. 12% of 70 is 8 4/10. Let's try another one. Determine 145% of 320. So again, we write our formula. We want to write our formula every time we use it. So P over 100 times of equals is. And now we're going to go back through and identify the different parts of our problem. So my percent is 145%, and that's what's going to go above 100 in our fraction. So I can write 145 over 100, and then times, and we need to find the of, the whole. Well, of 320, so the whole is 320, equals, and we don't know what it equals. So we're going to find out what it equals. And again, it's just multiplying fractions. So why don't you pause the video to solve and press play to check. When I went ahead and multiplied my fractions, I cross-simplified and multiplied straight across, and I got 2,320 over 5, which can be simplified because remember that's a division problem. 2,320 divided by 5 is 464. So 145% of 320 is 464. Now there's one more very simple problem without lots of reading involved, and it is determine 0.25% of 58. So why don't you go ahead and try to solve that one on your own, set it up, work it out. You guys know exactly how to do this, and then we'll check it in class tomorrow. So do this one on your own, and then I'm going to walk you through the multi-step problem at the bottom of your page. Monique takes a taxi from her school to the airport. The taxi charges a base fee of $5.50 and then 75 cents for each mile. She wants to tip the driver 15%. How much would the total be for a 15-mile trip to the airport? Round to the nearest cent. Well, because it's a word problem, the first thing I want to do is highlight or underline the question. And then I also want to highlight this part that says round to the nearest cent, because I think that's something that I'm going to need to remember to do at the end. I'm also going to want to look at my problem for any important numbers or information that I can circle or underline. Well, $5.50 is the base fee, so we know she has to pay that much anyway, so I think that's an important number. And then it says 75 cents for each mile. I think we're going to need that. She wants to tip the driver 15%. I think we'll need that as well, because we want to know how much would the total be for a 15-mile trip. So we have to break this down into several steps. And our first step is to find the total before the tip. Well, no matter how long her trip is, she's going to have to pay $5.50. But we are told that the cabbie charges 75 cents for every mile, and her trip is 15 miles. How can we find out how much he will charge for the distance he's taking her? Well, we can multiply. So what we're going to have to do is add $5.50 to whatever 15 times 75 cents is. So once we do that, we know exactly how much the total will be before the tip. Why don't you pause the video to work that out and then press play to check. The total before the tip was $16.75. Now we have to find the amount of the tip. So that's step 2. Find the amount of the tip. Well, we know that the tip is going to be 15% of the total amount. So 15% of 16.75. We need to calculate this. So I'm going to go ahead and use my formula, P over 100 times of equals is. And when we plug in our values, we get 15 over 100 times 16.75, and then we can multiply and find our answer. So why don't you pause to solve and then press play to check. So let me walk you through what I did in this problem. I set up my P over 100 times of equals is, and because I was working with a decimal right here, I thought maybe it might be easier if I converted my fraction 15/100ths into a decimal, which we know how to do. We know exactly what that would look like as a decimal. It's 0.15 or just 0.15. So I rewrote my problem as 0.15 times 16.75. And I thought that might be easier than trying to multiply a fraction times a decimal. So I went ahead and I worked that out. I multiplied my two decimals and I was able to get an answer. And remember, it says round to the nearest cent, so what I did is I went ahead and rounded the tip to the nearest cent. So the tip would be $2.51. That means the very last step of our problem is to add to find the total. So we're going to take the $16.75, which was the total before the tip, and we're going to add it to the $2.51, which was the tip. So we'll do $16.75 plus $2.51. And we'll be able to find the answer. So why don't you go ahead and pause the video so you can solve and then press play to check. It would cost Monique $19.26 to take a taxi ride from her school to the airport. Don't forget to do your summary questions and answer in complete sentences.